Jake Miller wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed deeper into the crystal caves of Kepler 442. The mining colony had been his home for 3 years now, and he knew these tunnels better than anyone. The blue crystals that lined the walls gave off a soft glow, lighting his path as he searched for new deposits. His scanner beeped steadily, picking up traces of rare minerals that would make this trip worthwhile. The beeping suddenly changed to a sharp, urgent sound. Jake stopped and looked at his device. Something was wrong. The reading showed metal, but not the kind he was looking for. This was different, refined metal, processed metal, the kind that came from technology, not from the ground. He followed the signal deeper into the cave system, his boots crunching on loose crystal fragments. The tunnel opened into a large chamber, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. In the center of the space lay the wreckage of a small spacecraft. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. The hull was smooth and curved, made of a silver material that seemed to shift colors in the crystal light. Strange symbols were carved along its sides. Jake approached carefully, his heart racing. First contact protocols ran through his mind, but this was supposed to be an uninhabited system. No one had ever reported alien activity here. The ship was small, barely larger than his mining pod, and it looked badly damaged. Scorch marks covered one side, and a large crack ran down the middle of the hull. He activated his comm unit to call the colony, but the signal was weak this deep underground. The message would have to wait. Jake pulled out his emergency toolkit and moved closer to the wreck. As he walked around the ship, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. There was a small opening in the hull, just big enough for a person to crawl through, but the edges were bent inward, as if something had forced its way out from inside. A tiny sound made him freeze. It was so quiet he almost missed it. A soft whimper, like a small animal in pain. Jake knelt down and listened carefully. The sound came again, from somewhere near the rear of the ship. He crawled closer, using his flashlight to peer into the shadows. There, huddled behind a piece of twisted metal, was the most incredible sight Jake had ever seen. A small figure, no bigger than his hand, pressed against the cave wall. At first, he thought it might be some kind of doll or toy from the ship. But then it moved, and Jake realized he was looking at a living being. The creature was clearly female, with delicate features and skin that had a faint blue tint. Her hair was white and seemed to glow in the dim light. She wore a tiny suit that looked like it was made from the same material as the ship. Her eyes were large and dark, and they stared at Jake with pure terror. Jake sat back on his heels, trying to process what he was seeing. This was a real alien, a survivor from the crash. And she was so small, so fragile-looking. He could see that she was hurt. One of her arms hung at an odd angle, and there were cuts on her face and hands. "Hey there," Jake said softly, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt you." The tiny being pressed herself further against the wall, if that was even possible. She opened her mouth and said something in a language Jake had never heard before. Her voice was high and musical, but filled with fear. Jake slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a small first aid kit. The alien's eyes followed his every movement. When he opened the kit, she flinched as if he had pulled out a weapon. Jake realized that she had no idea what his intentions were. For all she knew, he might be planning to harm her. "Look," he said, holding up a small bandage. "Medicine. To help you feel better." The alien said something else in her strange language. This time, Jake caught a few sounds that seemed to repeat. It sounded like she was trying to communicate with him, but neither of them could understand the other. Jake had an idea. He reached into his pack again and pulled out his emergency beacon. The device had a small speaker that could play recorded messages. More importantly, it had a basic translation program that could work with any technology it encountered. It was meant for emergency situations exactly like this. He placed the beacon on the ground between them and activated it. The device hummed to life and began scanning for any communication signals. After a moment, it beeped and displayed a message on its small screen. Language pattern detected. Translation module damaged. Partial function only. The alien seemed to recognize the beacon as technology. She said something, and the beacon translated into broken English. Not hurt please date. Jake's heart sank. Eat. She thought he was going to eat her. The idea was so horrible that he felt sick. He looked at the tiny being with new understanding. She wasn't just afraid. She was terrified that he was going to kill her. No, he said firmly, shaking his head. No eat, no hurt, help. The beacon translated his words, though the meaning came through in fragments. The alien's eyes widened, but she didn't look convinced. She pointed at herself and said something that the beacon translated as Zira. Zira, Jake. Repeated, and the alien nodded. I'm Jake. Jake Miller. Zira said his name back to him, though it sounded different in her musical voice. She was still pressed against the wall, but she seemed to be listening now instead of just panicking. Jake looked around the cave chamber and made a decision. The temperature was dropping as the planet's twin sun set, and Zira was clearly injured. If he left her here, she would die from the cold, if not from her wounds. But if he tried to move her, she might think he was capturing her for some terrible purpose. He decided to try a different approach. Jake pulled out his emergency shelter, a small device that could expand into a basic living space. He set it up in the corner of the chamber, far enough from Zira that she wouldn't feel trapped, but close enough that she could benefit from the warmth. As the shelter expanded, Zira watched with amazement. The device created a small room with walls, a heater, and even a basic bed. Jake went inside and began setting up his equipment. He made sure to move slowly and talk to her the whole time, even though she couldn't understand most of what he said. I'm going to make some food, he told her, pulling out his meal packets. And I'm going to try to fix your translator so we can talk better. The beacon caught enough of his words to give Zira a basic idea of what he was saying. She watched as he heated water and prepared a simple meal. The smell of food filled the chamber, and Jake noticed that Zira's stomach made a small growling sound. He prepared a tiny portion of food and water, placing it on a small piece of metal that he slid across the floor toward her. Zira stared at the offering for a long time before slowly reaching out to touch it. The beacon translated her words. Why give food going do. She couldn't finish the sentence, but Jake understood. Why would he feed her if he was planning to eat her later? The logic of her fear was heartbreaking. Because you're hungry, Jake said simply. And because that's what people do, we help each other. Zira took a small sip of water and a tiny bite of food. Her eyes closed for a moment, and Jake could see the relief on her face. She was starving, but she had been too afraid to ask for help. As the night grew colder, Jake noticed that Zira was shivering. He pulled out an extra blanket and cut a small piece from it. He folded it carefully and placed it near her along with the food. This time, she didn't hesitate to take it. For the first time since he had found her, Zira's eyes didn't look completely terrified when she looked at him. There was still fear there, but also something else. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just the beginning of trust. Jake settled down in his shelter for the night, leaving the door open so that Zira could see him. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but he was determined to help this tiny alien girl find her way home. Even if she didn't trust him yet, he would prove that not all big creatures were monsters. As he drifted off to sleep, Jake could hear Zira moving around in her corner of the cave. She was still alive, still fighting to survive. That was enough for now. Jake woke up to the sound of tiny movements in the cave. The crystal walls caught the light from his shelter and cast dancing shadows across the chamber. He sat up slowly, trying not to make any sudden moves that might scare Zira. She was awake, too, sitting in her corner with the small blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Good morning, Jake said softly. The translation beacon picked up his words and turned them into sounds that Zira could understand. She looked at him with those large, dark eyes. Still cautious, but not as terrified as the night before. Zira said something back, and the beacon translated it as morning warm. Her voice was still shaky, but she was trying to communicate. Jake prepared breakfast for both of them. He made his usual meal of dried fruit and protein bars. But he also took extra care to prepare something small and gentle for Zira. He crushed up some of the fruit and mixed it with water to make a soft paste. That would be easy for her to eat. When he placed the tiny portion near her, Zira hesitated for only a moment before taking it. She ate slowly, and Jake noticed that she kept watching him the whole time. It was as if she was trying to figure out what he was thinking. "I need to check your ship," Jake told her, pointing toward the wreckage. "Maybe I can fix something too. Help you call your people." The beacon translated his words, and Zira's eyes went wide. She said something quickly, and the device translated it as "no dangerous sharp . Jake nodded to show he understood. "I'll be careful. You don't have to come with me if you don't want to." But when Jake stood up and walked toward the ship, Zira got up too. She followed him at a distance, still clutching her blanket. Her injured arm was clearly bothering her, but she seemed determined not to let him out of her sight. The ship was even more damaged than Jake had first thought. The hull was cracked in several places, and most of the internal systems were destroyed. But he found what he was looking for near the front of the craft. A small device that looked like it might be some kind of communication system. It was damaged, but not beyond repair. "This is your radio, isn't it?" Jake asked, holding up the device. Zira nodded quickly and said something that the beacon translated as "yes, talk, home, worry, . Jake could hear the sadness in her voice. Her family was probably looking for her, not knowing if she was alive or dead. He examined the device carefully. It was made with technology he didn't recognize, but the basic principles seemed similar to human electronics. "I think I can fix this," he said, "but it might take some time." Over the next few hours, Jake worked on the communication device while Zira watched. She seemed fascinated by his tools and methods. Several times she tried to tell him something about how the device worked, but the translation was too broken for him to understand completely. As the day went on, Jake noticed that Zira was becoming less afraid of him. She moved closer when he was working, and she even pointed to different parts of the device when she wanted to show him something. Her injured arm was still a problem, though. Jake could see that it was swollen and painful. "Let me look at your arm," Jake said during their midday meal. "I have medicine that might help." Zira pulled back quickly, shaking her head. The beacon translated her words. "No dangerous. Hurt dangerous. Hurt." Jake realized that she was still afraid he might hurt her, even though he had been nothing but kind to her. He thought about how to show her that he wanted to help, not harm her. He had an idea. Jake pulled out his first aid kit and deliberately hurt himself. He pressed a sharp crystal against his finger until it drew blood. Zira gasped and said something that sounded worried. Then Jake showed her how he cleaned the wound and put a bandage on it. He demonstrated each step carefully, letting her see that the medicine made the pain go away and helped the cut heal. "See?" he said. "Medicine helps. It doesn't hurt." Zira looked at his bandaged finger and then at her own injured arm. She seemed to be thinking hard about something. Finally, she rolled up her tiny sleeve and showed him her arm. The injury was worse than Jake had thought. Her arm was clearly broken, and the bone was not healing correctly. If it wasn't fixed soon, she might lose the use of it forever, but Jake knew he had to be very careful. One wrong move and he could make things worse. He worked slowly and gently, using the smallest tools he had. Zira tensed up at first, but when she realized that he was actually helping her, she began to relax. Jake splinted her arm with tiny pieces of metal and fabric, creating a support that would help the bone heal properly. "Better?" he asked when he was finished. Zira moved her arm carefully and nodded. For the first time since he had found her, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it lit up her whole face. That evening, as they shared another meal, Jake tried to learn more about Zira and her people. The translation beacon was slowly getting better at understanding both of their languages, and they were able to have simple conversations. "Where do you come from?" Jake asked. Zira pointed up toward the ceiling of the cave. "Far. stars ships ships . How many of your people are there? Jake asked. Double quotes. Many. Zira said, then added something that the beacon translated as, but small. Weak hide from buns. Jake began to understand. Zira's people were tiny, which made them vulnerable to larger species. They had to be careful about who they encountered because they could be easily hurt or captured. What do you know about humans? Jake asked. Zira's expression changed immediately. Fear returned to her eyes and she moved back from him. She said something quickly, and the beacon translated it as bad stories told small fun . Jake felt sick. So that was why she had been so terrified of him. Her people believed that humans were monsters who ate smaller creatures. He wondered where these stories had come from and why her people believed them. Those stories are wrong. Jake said firmly, humans don't eat people. We don't kill for fun, we help each other. But Zira shook her head. Oh, one's tame take wall again. Never again. Jake realized that Zira's people had probably encountered other species that really did prey on smaller creatures. They had learned to fear all larger beings as a matter of survival. It made sense, but it also made Jake sad. How could he prove that he was different? He thought about it for a while, then had an idea. Jake went to his pack and pulled out a small photo. It showed him with his sister Amy and her children. In the picture, Amy was holding a tiny kitten and Jake was petting a small dog. Look, Jake said, showing the photo to Zira. My family. We take care of small animals. We don't hurt them. Zira studied the picture carefully. She pointed to the kitten and said something that the beacon translated as baby animal you . Safe? Yes, Jake said. We love small animals. We protect them. Zira looked at the photo for a long time. Then she looked at Jake, and he could see that she was thinking hard about something. She said something that the beacon translated as maybe big big different . It wasn't complete trust, but it was a start. Jake could see that Zira was beginning to question the stories she had been told. She was starting to see him as an individual, not just as a member of a species she feared. That night, Jake worked on building a better shelter for Zira. He used materials from her ship and his own, supplies to create a small living space that was just her size. It had walls, a roof, and even a tiny door that she could open and close. When he showed it to her, Zira's eyes filled with tears. She said something that the beacon translated as for me do made home . Everyone deserves a safe place to sleep, Jake said. Zira went inside her new shelter and looked around. It was perfect for her size, with everything she needed. She came back out and walked over to Jake. Very carefully she reached out and touched his hand with her tiny one. Thank you, she said in English, without using the beacon. Jake smiled. You're welcome, Zira. As they settled down for the night, Jake felt hopeful. Zira was starting to trust him, and he was beginning to understand her people. It would take time, but maybe they could overcome the fear and misunderstanding that separated their species. In her new shelter, Zira lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. The stories her grandmother had told her about humans didn't match what she was seeing. Jake was gentle and kind. He had helped her when she was hurt, fed her when she was hungry, and built her a home when she had nowhere to live. Maybe she thought some of the stories were wrong. Maybe not all big ones were monsters. Maybe some of them, like Jake, were friends. Jake woke up to an unusual sound. It was a soft humming noise, like music but not quite music. He sat up and looked around the cave chamber. The sound was coming from Zira's small shelter. Through the tiny window he had built for her, he could see a faint blue glow. Zira, he called softly, are you okay? The humming stopped, and Zira came out of her shelter. She looked excited, more alive than Jake had ever seen her. In her good hand she held the translation beacon. But something was different about it. The device was glowing with the same blue light that Jake had seen through her window. Jake, she said, and her voice was clearer than it had ever been before. I can hear you, really hear you. Jake stared at her in amazement. The translator is working? Yes, Zira said, and now Jake could hear every word perfectly. My body makes electricity. Small amounts, but enough to power my people's technology. The translator needed time to connect with my energy. Now it works like it should? For the first time since they had met, Jake and Zira could truly talk to each other. No more broken words or confused meanings. They could have a real conversation. This is incredible, Jake said. I have so many questions, and I have things to tell you, Zira said. Important things. About my people, about humans, about the stories we tell. They sat down together, Jake on his sleeping bag and Zira on a small cushion he had made for her. The crystal walls of the cave seemed to glow brighter, as if they were celebrating this moment of understanding. Tell me about the stories, Jake said. Why do your people think humans are monsters? Zira looked down at her hands. Long ago, when my people first learned to travel between stars, we were explorers. We went to many worlds, met many species. Most were friendly, but some were not. Some of the big ones saw us as food or toys. They captured us, hurt us, made us afraid. Jake felt a chill go down his spine. That's horrible. Then we learned about humans, Zira continued, but we never met any face-to-face. We only heard stories from other species. Some said humans were warriors who conquered worlds. Others said they were dangerous, unpredictable. We heard recordings of human military communications during your wars. The words were about fighting, about destroying enemies. Jake began to understand. So your people thought all humans were like the soldiers in those recordings? Yes, Zira sighed, and there were other stories. Tales of humans who kept smaller creatures in cages, who experimented on them. My grandmother told me that humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. She said they would eat anything that moved, but they enjoyed causing pain. But those stories aren't true, Jake said. I mean, some humans have done bad things in the past. Every species probably has. But most of us aren't like that? Zira nodded. I know that now. You have shown me differently. But for my whole life, I believed the stories. When I first saw you, I thought you were going to torture me before you ate me. Jake felt sick thinking about how terrified she must have been. I'm so sorry, Zira. I wish I had known what you were thinking. You could not have known, Zira said. And even if you had, would it have changed anything? You still would have. Help me, Jake thought about that. Yes, I would have. But I might have been able to help you feel less afraid. You did help me feel less afraid, Zira said. Every day, every kind thing you did, it made me question the stories. When you bandaged my arm, when you built me a shelter, when you shared your food, I started to think that maybe the stories were wrong. Jake smiled. What made you really start to believe I wasn't going to hurt you? The picture, Zira said without hesitation. When you showed me the picture of your family with the small animals, that was when I knew for sure that humans could be gentle. No creature that wanted to hurt small things would keep them safe and love them. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their peoples and their worlds. Jake learned that Zira's people, the Velari, were peaceful traders who traveled between stars in small ships. They were skilled at making beautiful things from crystals and metals, and they traded their artwork for the things they needed. We are not warriors, Zira explained. When we meet dangerous species, we run and hide. It is the only way we can survive. But running and hiding means you miss out on meeting friendly species too, Jake said. Yes, Zira admitted. We are so afraid of being hurt that we avoid contact with most other beings. Only a few species have proven themselves safe to us. Jake told Zira about human society, about how they had learned to live together despite their differences. He explained about laws that protected people, about how humans cared for animals and plants, about doctors who dedicated their lives to healing others. "We're not perfect," Jake said. "We make mistakes and some humans do bad things. But most of us try to be good. We try to help each other and protect those who can't protect themselves." Zira listened carefully to everything Jake said. "Your people sound very different from the stories I heard. But I have a question. If humans are so good at helping others, why do so many species fear you?" Jake thought about that for a long time. "I think it's because we're good at fighting when we need to fight. When humans explore new worlds, we bring weapons to protect ourselves. When other species see those weapons, they think we're dangerous. And when we defend ourselves, we fight hard. Maybe that scares them." "But you also have tools for healing and building," Zira pointed out. "Why don't the stories talk about those?" "Because scary stories spread faster than good ones," Jake said sadly. "People remember the bad things more than the good things." Zira was quiet for a while, thinking. Then she said, "Jake, I want to tell you something. The real reason I am here on this planet." Jake looked at her with interest. "I thought you crashed here by accident." "Yes and no," Zira said. "I was supposed to be traveling with my brother to a trading post, but I changed course without telling him. I wanted to explore this system because our sensors detected something unusual." "What kind of unusual?" "Energy readings that didn't match any known natural phenomena. I thought it might be ancient technology, something left behind by an old civilization. I was hoping to find artifacts that my people could study." Jake felt a chill. "Zira, this is a human mining colony. The energy readings you detected were probably from our equipment." Zira stared at him in shock. "You mean this whole time I have been on a human world?" "Yes," Jake said. "There are about 50 humans living in the main colony, about 20 miles. From here, I work alone because I prefer the quiet, but I go back to town every few weeks for supplies. So, when my ship is fixed, when I call for help, my people will come here expecting to find me on an empty world. But instead, they will find a human colony." Jake realized what she was thinking. "They'll think the humans captured you." "Yes," Zira said, her voice filled with worry. "And they will bring help, military help. My brother will not come alone if he thinks I am in danger." "What kind of help?" Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "The Sarani," Zira said. "They are a warrior species that helps protect smaller species like mine. They hate humans because humans once tried to expand into their territory. If they think humans hurt me, they will come ready for war." Jake felt his heart racing. "How long do we have?" "I don't know," Zira said. "It depends on how long it takes my brother to organize a search party. Maybe a few days, maybe a week." "We need to fix your communicator fast," Jake said. "You need to contact your people and tell them you're safe before they bring the Sarani." "But Jake," Zira said, "even if I tell them I'm safe, they might not believe me. They might think you forced me to say those things." Jake ran his hands through his hair, thinking hard. "Then we need to prove it. We need to show them that humans and Valari can be friends." "How?" Zira asked. "I don't know yet," Jake said. "But we'll figure it out. We have to." Zira walked over to where Jake was sitting and climbed up onto his knee. She looked up at him with her large, dark eyes. "Jake, I want you to know something. Even if my people don't believe me, even if there is trouble, I will never forget what you have done for me. You saved my life, and more than that, you changed my mind about your people. That is a gift I can never repay." Jake gently touched her shoulder with his finger. "You don't need to repay anything, Zira. Friends help each other." "That's what friends do. Friends," Zira repeated, smiling. "Yes, we are friends, the first human and Valari to be friends." "Maybe," Jake said, "but hopefully not the last." As they worked together to repair the communicator, both Jake and Zira knew that their friendship was about to be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. The peaceful days in the crystal cave were coming to an end, and soon they would have to face the fears and prejudices of both their peoples, but they also knew that they had something precious that neither of them had expected to find. They had found proof that friendship could exist between species that were supposed to be enemies. They had found hope that understanding could overcome fear. Whether that would be enough to prevent a war, only time would tell. Jake and Zira worked together for 2 days to fix her communicator. The device was more complex than anything Jake had ever seen, but with Zira's help, he was able to repair the damaged parts. When they finally got it working, the small device hummed with power and sent out a signal into space. "It's done," Zira said, looking both happy and worried. "My people will hear this signal and know where to find me." Jake felt the same mix of emotions. He was glad that Zira would be able to go home, but he was also afraid of what might happen when her people arrived. "How long before they get here?" "Not long," Zira said. "Maybe 1 day, maybe 2. My brother Kale is a good pilot and he knows these star systems well." Jake made a decision. "I need to go back to the colony and warn them. If your people are bringing Sorani warriors, the other humans need to know." "I'll come with you," Zira said quickly. Jake looked at her with surprise. "Are you sure?" "It's a long trip and you're still recovering from your injuries." "I'm sure," Zira said. "If there's going to be trouble, I want to be there. Maybe I can help prevent it." Jake built a small carrier for Zira, like a backpack, but designed to keep her safe and comfortable during the trip. She could see out through a clear window, and she had her own air supply and temperature control. It took them most of the day to reach the main colony. The mining colony was a collection of small buildings and equipment surrounded by a protective wall. About 50 humans lived there, mostly miners and engineers who worked to extract valuable minerals from the planet. When Jake arrived with his strange passenger, word spread quickly. Colony leader Pete Johnson was a big man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been on Kepler 442b longer than anyone else, and the other colonists respected his judgment. When Jake explained what had happened, Pete listened carefully. "So you're telling me that we're about to have visitors," Pete said. "Alien visitors who might think we're holding this little girl prisoner." "That's right," Jake said. "And they might be bringing warriors with them." Pete looked at Zira, who was sitting on Jake's shoulder. "What do you think, miss? Is there a way to convince your people that we're friendly?" Zira spoke up in her clear, musical voice. "I don't know. My people have been afraid of humans for a long time. Even if I tell them that Jake is good, they might think he forced me to say it." "What? About the Sorani?" Pete asked. "What are they like?" "They are proud warriors," Zira explained. "They see themselves as protectors of smaller species. If they think humans have hurt me, they will want to fight." Pete rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Jake, you say this little lady has been with you. For over a week, has she been free to leave if she wanted to?" "Of course," Jake said. "I've been helping her, not holding her prisoner." "Then maybe that's our answer," Pete said. "When her people arrive, we make sure they can see that she's free to go. We don't try to hide anything or make excuses. We just show them the truth." The next morning, the colonists were awakened by a sound they had never heard before. It was like thunder, but it came from above. Everyone ran outside to see 3 ships descending from the sky. 2 of the ships were small and silver, like the one that had crashed in the cave. The 3rd ship was much larger and darker, with weapon systems that were clearly visible. "The big ship is Sorani," Zira said, her voice filled with worry. "The other 2 are Velari ships." The ships landed in an open area outside the colony walls. Jake and Pete walked out to meet them, with Zira riding on Jake's shoulder. The other colonists followed at a distance, curious but cautious. The door of one of the Velari ships opened, and several tiny figures emerged. They were all similar to Zira, but dressed in different colors. One of them, who looked like a male version of Zira, stepped forward. "Kale," Zira called out happily. "Brother, I'm here." Kale looked up at his sister sitting on Jake's shoulder, and his face went through several emotions: relief, joy, and then anger. He said something in the Velari language, and the translator device on Jake's belt picked it up. "Sister, get away from that creature immediately. We are here to rescue you." "I don't need rescuing," Zira said firmly. "Jake saved my life. He's my friend." Before Kale could respond, the door of the large Sorani ship opened. A massive reptilian creature emerged, followed by several others. They were at least 8 feet tall, with scales that looked like armor and eyes that glowed with inner fire. The leader wore insignia that marked him as a high-ranking officer. I am General Thrix of the Sorani Defense Force, the creature announced in a voice like grinding stone. We are here to investigate reports of human aggression against the Valari people. Pete stepped forward, keeping his hands visible and empty. I'm Pete Johnson, leader of this colony. We welcome you to our world. As you can see, Zira is safe and unharmed. General Thrix looked at Zira sitting on Jake's shoulder. The small one appears to be a captive. Human, release her immediately. I'm not a captive, Zira said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. I'm here because I choose to be. Impossible, General Thrix said. All reports indicate that humans capture and consume smaller species. You are obviously being coerced. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. General, I understand your concerns, but you're wrong about humans. We don't hurt innocent people. Lies, General Thrix snarled. We have documentation of human aggression. We have intercepted communications showing human military operations. We know what your species is capable of. Those were old recordings, Pete said, from wars that happened years ago. We're not soldiers here. We're miners and engineers. We just want to live in peace. But General Thrix wasn't listening. He turned to his soldiers and gave them an order in the Sorani language. The soldiers began to spread out, surrounding the humans. You will release the Valari captive and submit to arrest, General Thrix commanded. You will be taken to face trial for your crimes against smaller species. Wait, Zira called out. She climbed down from Jake's shoulder and walked into the open space between the two groups. Her tiny figure looked impossibly small, surrounded by all the larger beings. General Thrix, I am Zira of the Valari trader family of Altair 7. I speak for myself, and I tell you now that I am not a captive. Jake Miller found me injured and alone, and he cared for me. He fed me, healed my wounds, and helped me contact my people. He is not my enemy. He is my friend. General Thrix looked down at her with his glowing eyes. You speak words of friendship, but this is clearly the result of human manipulation. They have conditioned you to defend them. No, Zira said firmly. I speak the truth. For the first week after Jake found me, I was terrified of him. I believed the stories about humans being monsters. But Jake proved those stories wrong. He showed me kindness when he could have ignored me. He showed me respect when he could have treated me like an animal. Kale stepped forward, his face full of concern. Sister, you don't understand. These creatures are dangerous. They have deceived you somehow. They have not deceived me, Zira said. I have deceived myself. All of us have. We have believed stories about humans without ever meeting them. We have judged them based on fear. Instead of facts, General Thrix raised his weapon. Enough. The small one is clearly traumatized and confused. We will take her to safety and punish those responsible for her condition. No, Zira said, and her voice was stronger than Jake had ever heard it. I will not go with you if you hurt my friends. The word friends seemed to echo in the air. Jake felt his heart swell with pride and sadness at the same time. Zira was willing to risk everything to defend him and the other humans. Friends? General Thrix laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. A Valari and a human? Impossible. Not impossible, Zira said. I am proof that it is possible. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. The Sorani soldiers had their weapons ready, and Jake could see that some of the human colonists were reaching for their own defensive equipment. One wrong move, one misunderstood gesture, and there would be violence. Jake made a decision that he hoped wouldn't get everyone killed. He walked forward and knelt down next to Zira. General, I know you don't trust humans, and I understand why. But I'm asking you to trust Zira. She's smart and brave, and she knows her own mind. If she says we're friends, then we're friends. General Thrix pointed his weapon at Jake. You dare to make demands? I'm not making demands, Jake said calmly. I'm asking for the chance to prove that not all humans are monsters. Give us time to show you who we really are. The silence stretched out for what felt like hours. Finally, General Thrix spoke. You have 1 hour to convince me that you are not a threat. If you fail, I will arrest all of you for crimes against the Valari people. Jake looked at Zira, who nodded encouragingly. 1 hour to change centuries of fear and misunderstanding. 1 hour to prevent a war. It wasn't much time, but it was better than nothing. Jake looked at the crowd of tense faces around him. Human colonists, Serani soldiers, and Valari crew members all waited to see what would happen next. General Thrix stood with his weapon pointed at Jake, his reptilian eyes glowing with suspicion. 1 hour to change everything. Zira, Jake said quietly, what would convince your people that humans can be trusted? Zira thought for a moment. Show them who you really are. Not the stories they have heard, but the truth about human nature. Jake nodded and turned to Pete Johnson. Pete, can you gather some of the colonists? I want to show our guests what we do here. Pete understood immediately. Sarah, bring your medical kit. Tom, get your engineering tools. Linda, bring some of the children's drawings from the school. As the colonists hurried to collect their things, Jake began to speak. General Thrix, you said you have evidence that humans are dangerous. I want to show you evidence that we're not. You have 55 minutes, General Thrix replied coldly. Sarah Martinez was the colony's doctor. She was a small woman with gentle hands and kind eyes. She came forward carrying her medical bag and knelt down next to Zira. May I examine you? Sarah asked. I want to make sure your injuries have healed properly. Zira nodded and allowed Sarah to check her arm and the cuts. On her face? Sarah was incredibly careful, using tiny instruments designed for delicate work. As she worked, she explained what she was doing. The bone has healed well, Sarah said. Whoever set this fracture did excellent work. The cuts are clean and infection-free. You've been very well cared for. General Thrix watched this examination closely. Of course, the captive appears healthy. They would want to keep her alive for their own purposes. What purposes? Zira asked, looking up at the general. What could humans possibly gain from keeping me prisoner? General Thrix seemed surprised by the question. Information about your people's technology and trade routes? Knowledge of Valari weaknesses that could be exploited. Then why haven't they asked me about any of those things? Zira said. In all the time I've been with Jake, he has never once asked me about Valari secrets or military information. He asked me about my family, my dreams, my favorite foods. He asked me about art and music and stories, but never about weapons or trade routes. Kale stepped forward, his face showing confusion. Sister, surely they must have questioned you about something useful to them. They did, Zira said with a smile. Jake asked me how to make Valari crystal gardens because he thought they were beautiful. He asked me to teach him words in our language because he wanted to communicate better. He asked me about our music because he enjoyed hearing me sing. Tom. Right, the colony's chief engineer had arrived with his tools. He knelt down and began to show Zira's people the equipment they used for mining and construction. This is a sonic excavator, Tom explained. It uses sound waves to break up rock without damaging crystal formations. We developed it specifically to avoid destroying the beautiful crystal caves on this planet. One of the Valari crew members examined the device closely. This technology could be used as a weapon, he said suspiciously. It could, Tom agreed. But look at the safety features we've built into it. Multiple redundant systems to prevent accidental harm. Automatic shutoffs. If it detects living tissue, we designed it to protect life, not destroy it. General Thrix growled impatiently. Clever words and pretty demonstrations prove nothing. We have seen human military communications. We know they speak of conquest and destruction. You're talking about soldier communications during wartime, Pete said. But we're not soldiers, General. We're civilians. We're families trying to build a life on a new world. Linda Foster, the colony's teacher, came forward with a collection of artwork. These are drawings made by our children, she said, spreading them out on the ground where everyone could see them. The drawings showed families playing together, animals being cared for, and people working in gardens. One picture showed a human child feeding a small bird. Another showed a family adopting a lost puppy. This is what human children think about, Linda said. Taking care of others, playing with friends, protecting those who are smaller and weaker. Zira looked at the drawings with wonder. These are beautiful. Your children draw the same things Valari children draw. Families, friends, animals to care for. All children are the same in some ways, Linda said. They want to feel safe, to be loved, to have friends to play with. General Thrick seemed less certain now, but he still held his weapon. Children's drawings mean nothing. Adults make the decisions that matter. Then let me tell you about the decisions I've made, Jake said. He pulled out his personal communicator and showed it to the group. This device can send messages to Earth. When I found Zira, I could have reported the discovery immediately. The human government would have been very interested in meeting the first Valari ever encountered. Why didn't you? Kale asked. Because Zira was scared and hurt, Jake said simply. She needed help, not attention from government officials. I decided her well-being was more important than making history. You could have studied her, General Thrick said. Learned about her people's technology and biology. I could have, Jake. Agreed, but that would have been wrong. Zira is a person, not a specimen. She deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. Zira climbed onto a small rock so everyone could see her better. I want to say something, she announced. When I first met Jake, I was terrified because I believed the stories about humans being monsters. But Jake proved those stories wrong, not with words but with actions. She paused and looked around at all the faces watching her. He could have ignored me and let me die. He could have captured me and sold me to collectors. He could have experimented on me or hurt me for his own amusement. Instead, he fed me when I was hungry, healed me when I was injured, and built me a home when I had nowhere to live. But sister, Kale said, his voice full of concern, how can you be sure he won't hurt you later? Because, Zira said, her voice growing stronger, I asked him to take me home to you. And he said yes. He has spent days working to repair my communicator so I could call for help. He brought me here to meet you, even though he knew you might try to hurt him. Does that sound like the behavior of a monster? General Thrix lowered his weapon slightly. It is ... unusual, he admitted. It's not unusual for humans, Pete said. It's how most of us behave most of the time. We help each other, we protect those who need protection, and we try to make the world a better place. Then why do so many species fear you? One of the Serani soldiers asked. Because fear spreads. Faster than friendship, Jake said. When humans first started exploring space, we made mistakes. We were defensive, quick to fight when we felt threatened. Some of our early meetings with other species went badly, and those stories spread throughout the galaxy. But we learned from those mistakes, Pete added. We created laws to protect other species. We established diplomatic protocols. We tried to become better neighbors. The problem is, Sarah said, that good news doesn't travel as fast as bad news. Stories about humans helping others don't get repeated as often as stories about humans fighting. General Thrix was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, if humans are truly peaceful, why do you carry weapons? For the same reason you carry weapons, Jake said. To protect ourselves and others from those who would do harm. But we don't use them unless we have to. And how often do you have to? Kale asked. Almost never, Pete replied. In the 3 years this colony has existed, we've never had to use a weapon against another intelligent being. We've used them to scare away dangerous animals, but that's all. Zira suddenly stood up on her rock and raised her voice. I have something important to say. Something that might surprise everyone. All eyes turned to her tiny figure. I don't want to go home, she announced. The silence that followed was deafening. Kale stared at his sister in shock. What do you mean? I mean I want to stay here, Zira said. With Jake and the other humans. I want to learn more about them, and I want to help them learn about us. Sister, you can't be serious, Kale said. These are humans. They're dangerous. No, they're not, Zira said firmly. They're different from us, but they're not dangerous. And I think our peoples need to get to know each other. We've been afraid of each other for too long. General Thrix stepped forward, his weapon now pointed at the ground. This is highly irregular. A Valari requesting asylum with humans. I'm not requesting asylum, Zira said. I'm requesting the chance to build a bridge between our peoples. To show that friendship is possible, Jake knelt down next to Zira's rock. Are you sure about this? You'd be giving up your old life, your family, everything you've ever known? I'm not giving up my family, Zira said, looking at Kale. I'm expanding it. I want both my peoples to be my family. Kale looked at his sister for a long time. Finally, he spoke. If this is truly what you want, sister, then I will support you. But I want to stay here too, at least for a while. I need to make sure you're safe. And I want to establish a monitoring station, General Frick said unexpectedly, to observe this experiment in interspecies cooperation. Pete smiled. You're all welcome to stay. We'll build new facilities to accommodate everyone. It might be crowded, but we'll make it work.